Okay, so let's take a deep dive today into a story that I think will be really fascinating for our listeners.
Yeah.
This one goes back to 1960s Sicily.
Okay.
And, think about this. Like, imagine a time when a man could basically just erase a crime.
Wow.
Like erase a crime as serious as kidnapping and assault,
Oh my.
simply by marrying his victim.
Really?
It sounds unbelievable.
Yeah.
But this was actually the reality
Mm.
for women in Italy because of a law
Wow.
that allowed for something called
Oh, interesting.
reparatory marriage.
Repertory marriage.
Right.
It's a jarring concept for us today, for sure.
Yeah.
But this law, it was really deeply rooted in a patriarchal society
Right.
where a woman's honor was like completely tied to her virginity and,
Hmm.
her marriage prospects.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a time and a place where tradition really held a lot of power, especially for women.
Right.
And this is the setting for the really incredible story of Franca Viola. She was this young Sicilian woman who actually challenged this archaic law,
Wow.
and it sparked a national conversation
Mm.
about women's rights.
Right.
So to kind of break down this story,
Yeah.
we'll be using an episode of the Case File podcast.
Okay.
And the episode's called Case 324, Franca Viola.
Case 324.
Yep.
Okay.
And we'll also be using an article by Neve Cullen.
Great. So Franca's story is really amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a powerful testament to individual courage.
Yeah.
But I think it also offers us a glimpse into this
Yeah.
really complex social and legal landscape of Italy in the 1960s.
Yeah, a society that was grappling with tradition and modernity.
Exactly.
So to start off, can you kind of paint a picture for us?
Sure.
Like, what was life actually like
Yeah.
for women in Sicily during that era?
Well, imagine, a society where a woman's life
Okay.
was largely, predetermined by societal expectations. Marriage was really considered like the ultimate goal for women.
Right.
And a woman's worth was often judged by her ability to secure, a good husband,
Okay.
one who could provide, financial security and social standing.
It sounds incredibly restrictive.
It was premarital relationships were, they were heavily frowned upon.
Wow.
And like any hint of impropriety
Oh, wow.
could just irrevocably damage a woman's reputation.
Really?
Yeah, it would essentially ruin her chances of having a respectable marriage.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it's in this context that Franca Viola encounters Filippo Melodia.
Right.
The Case File episode describes him as this wealthy
Okay.
and well-connected man,
Yeah.
but also with a rather unsavory reputation.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, Filippo had a history of petty crime and was even rumored to have ties to the Sicilian mafia.
Oh, wow.
Despite this,
Okay.
his wealth and social standing really made him a desirable match
Yeah,
in the eyes of a lot of families.
I see.
And he became fixated on Franca,
Okay.
believing that he could possess her like a prized trophy.
And when Franca rejects his advances, he doesn't really take it well, does he?
No, not at all.
Right.
Filippo's ego is bruised, and basically he embarks on this campaign of harassment and intimidation.
Gotcha.
According to the Case File episode, he stalked Franca,
Jeez.
threatened her family, and even resorted to arson. I mean, he set fire to their vineyard.
Wow. His actions were clearly those of a man who was used to getting what he wanted.
Yeah.
Someone who truly believed that he could just force Franca into submission.
Absolutely. And, this behavior really reflects the power dynamics of the time.
Right.
Filippo, with his wealth and his influence,
Right.
felt entitled to Franca's affections, and he was willing to use violence to achieve his aims.
And this all culminates in a terrifying event on December 26, 1965.
Right?
The day after Christmas.
You're right.
Filippo, along with a group of 12 masked men,
Oh, my God.
abducted Franca from her family home. Imagine the sheer terror that Franca and her family must felt as these men
I can't even imagine.
stormed into their home, shattered their sense of security.
It's just a chilling scene. I mean, straight out of a nightmare.
Yeah,
The Case File episode mentions that they even kidnapped
right.
Franca's younger brother for a short time,
Yeah.
adding to the family's trauma.
It's just unbelievable.
It was meant to send a message, to
Yeah.
instill fear and to break Franca's spirit.
Yeah, and Filippo probably believed that he could exploit this reparatory marriage law
Absolutely.
to his advantage.
He thought by assaulting Franca, he
Right.
could force her into a corner,
Hmm.
making marriage to him seem like her only option
Right.
to salvage her reputation and avoid further shame.
It's almost inconceivable that such a law existed,
Yeah.
allowing a perpetrator to essentially escape punishment just by marrying his victim.
I know. It's a stark reminder of how deeply ingrained
Yeah.
patriarchal values were in Italian society back then.
Hmm.
Women were seen as property, their
Mhm.
honor and their worth tied to their purity and
Right.
their marital status.
So after days of being held captive,
Wow.
the police finally locate Franca and they bring her back home.
Okay.
Filippo, arrogant and delusional, probably thought he had won, right?
Right. I mean, he was expecting Franca to accept his proposal
Yeah.
to, avoid further shame and scandal.
But in a stunning act of defiance,
Wow.
Franca rejects his proposal
Really?
publicly and unequivocally.
It was a pivotal moment, like a resounding no
Wow.
that reverberated throughout Italy. Franca's refusal, it wasn't simply a rejection of Filippo,
Okay.
but a rejection of this entire system
Right.
that sought to control and silence women.
Wow, this must have been a huge shock to Filippo
Right.
and to those who still clung to those traditional beliefs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Neve Cullen's article highlights how Franca's case became a national sensation.
Wow.
It really divided public opinion and sparked all these debates about women's rights and
Yes.
the need for legal reform.
And the fact that Franca's family, despite all the immense social pressure
Right.
that they must have faced, stood by her decision.
Wow.
It's just remarkable.
Yeah, their unwavering support. It
Mhm.
demonstrates a growing awareness
Yeah.
of women's autonomy
Right.
and a willingness to challenge these deeply ingrained societal norms.
Franca's act of defiance was really just the beginning
Right.
of a very long and arduous journey
Yeah.
towards justice and equality.
Indeed.
Her refusal to be silenced
Yeah.
really set the stage for a landmark legal battle
Wow.
and helped to pave the way
Yeah.
for lasting change in Italy.
For sure.
So let's talk about that trial.
Okay.
What were some of the key arguments
Yeah.
that were presented,
Right.
and how did Franca navigate all of that pressure
Right.
and scrutiny of the courtroom? The trial itself, I mean, it must have been a spectacle.
Oh, yeah.
You've got this young woman challenging not just an individual,
Right.
but like an entire system
Right.
that had protected men like Filippo for so long.
It really was a clash between tradition and modernity,
Right.
played out on this national stage. Filippo's defense team, as
Okay.
you might expect,
Yeah.
tried to discredit Franca's account.
Of course.
They tried to paint her as a willing participant in this whole ordeal.
Wow.
They even suggested that she was in love with Filippo
Oh, come on.
and that the kidnapping was completely made up.
It's just classic victim blaming.
Excellent.
Trying to shift the focus
Right.
away from Filippo's actions
Yeah.
and onto Franca's character.
Exactly. They were tapping into those prevailing societal prejudices,
Right.
hoping to sway public opinion
Yeah.
and undermine her credibility.
But Franca, despite all of the pressure, all the intimidation,
Yeah.
refused to be silenced.
Good for her.
Her testimony, as detailed in both the case file episode and Cullen's article, was incredibly powerful.
It really was.
She recounts the harrowing experience of her abduction.
Yeah.
The fear, the threats, the assault.
Wow.
And she just refused to let Filippo's actions be minimized or dismissed.
Yeah, her willingness to speak out,
Right.
to publicly challenge the narratives that
Yeah.
were being spun by Filippo's defense.
Yeah.
That was crucial.
Yeah.
It helped expose the truth
Right.
and really dismantle this ingrained notion that women were somehow responsible
Mhm.
for the violence that was perpetrated against them.
And it seems that the court actually listened.
Yeah.
Filippo was found guilty
Wow.
and sentenced to 11 years in prison,
Wow. 11 years.
which is a significant sentence for that time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a landmark verdict.
Yeah.
Signaling that the tide was starting to turn. The court's decision,
Yeah.
sent a really clear message
Right.
that women were not property
Yes.
to be controlled,
Right.
but individuals deserving of protection and justice.
It's interesting, though, that even after the trial,
Yeah.
Franca and her family continued to face challenges.
Really?
The case file episode mentions
Right.
that they were ostracized by their community,
Wow.
shunned by those who clung to those traditional views.
That's awful. It really underscores the fact that, legal victories,
Yeah.
while important,
Right.
don't always translate into immediate social change.
Right.
A lot of people in Franca's community
Yeah.
still saw her actions as like a betrayal of societal norms, like a challenge to this patriarchal order
Right.
that they were used to.
Yeah. It must have been incredibly difficult for Franca and her family
I can imagine.
to endure that kind of isolation,
Yeah.
especially after everything they'd been through.
It really speaks volumes about their strength and resilience. They chose to, stand by their principles,
Yeah.
to prioritize Franca's well-being and her agency,
Right.
even in the face of, societal rejection.
And their story, as tragic as it is,
Right.
highlights the power of individual courage
Yeah,
to challenge the status quo
absolutely.
and inspire change.
Yeah, it reminds us that,
Yeah.
progress is rarely linear.
Right.
It's often met with resistance and backlash.
Of course.
But Franca's refusal to back down,
Right.
her determination to seek justice,
Yeah.
really ignited a spark
Yeah.
that would eventually lead to some significant legal and social reforms in Italy.
And amidst the adversity,
Yeah.
there were glimmers of hope, too.
Okay.
Signs that attitudes were starting to shift.
Okay, good.
The case file episode notes
Yeah.
that Franca received support from some unexpected places,
Like where?
like Italian President Giuseppe Saragat
Wow.
and Prime Minister Aldo Moro, for example,
Okay.
sent her wedding gifts
Really?
when she married her childhood sweetheart a few years later.
That's amazing, especially considering the conservative climate at the time.
Yeah, it was a symbolic act.
Yeah.
Acknowledging Franca's courage
Right.
and sort of subtly signaling a growing acceptance
Yeah.
of her defiance.
And even Pope Paul VI granted Franca and her husband a private audience,
Wow.
which, given the Catholic Church's stance at the time
Right.
on marriage and sexuality,
Right.
was really significant.
Yeah, it suggests that even within traditional institutions,
Yeah.
there was a recognition that change was necessary,
Right.
that the old ways of thinking about women's roles and rights
Yeah.
were no longer tenable.
Exactly.
And then
Yeah.
there's the 1968 film The Most Beautiful Wife.
Oh.
It was inspired by Franca's story,
Yeah.
and it reached a really wide audience
Mm.
and further cemented her status
Yeah.
as a national hero
Right.
and a symbol of female empowerment.
Art can be a powerful catalyst for social change.
That's absolutely.
And that film really helped to amplify Franca's story
Yeah.
and spark more conversations about women's rights and legal reform.
But throughout it all, Franca remained remarkably humble.
Yeah.
She never really sought the spotlight or presented herself as, like a crusader or anything.
That's what makes her story even more compelling.
Yeah.
She was an ordinary woman thrust into these really extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah.
And her response
Right.
was one of quiet determination,
Mhm.
a refusal to be defined by the violence she endured.
And while Filippo eventually met a pretty tragic end,
Wow.
likely because of his involvement with the mafia,
Oh, okay.
Franca went on to lead a relatively private life.
Yeah.
She married her childhood sweetheart, raised a family.
It's a real testament to her resilience.
Right.
Her ability to reclaim her life and
Mhm.
find happiness,
Right.
despite the trauma that she had experienced.
Yeah, and while details about her current life are pretty scarce,
Okay.
you could just imagine her living with this quiet strength.
Right.
A testament to the enduring power of the human spirit.
Absolutely.
Her story reminds us that even when faced with seemingly insurmountable obstacles, one person's courage can make a difference,
Right.
can spark a movement,
Yeah.
can change the course of history.
It's a powerful reminder
Right.
that we all have a role to play
Yeah.
in challenging injustice
Right.
and advocating for a more equitable world.
So as we reflect on Franca Viola's legacy,
Yeah.
what lessons can we draw from her story?
Right.
And how can we apply those lessons
Yeah.
to our own lives? I think Franca's story, while it's rooted in a specific time and place,
Yeah.
it carries these universal themes
Mm.
that resonate deeply even today.
Right.
It kind of begs the question,
Yeah.
what seemingly unchangeable norms in our own societies
Right.
might we have the courage to challenge?
That's the real takeaway here. It's
Yeah.
about recognizing those injustices that we might be tolerating or even, perpetuating
Yeah.
just because that's how it's always been done.
Right.
Franca's story is like a powerful reminder
Yeah.
that change is possible,
Yeah.
that one person's actions can actually make a difference.
It's inspiring,
Yeah.
but it also makes you stop and think about,
Right.
your own life.
Yeah.
What are we accepting as just the way things are?
Mm.
That we could be questioning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not always about, you know,
Yeah.
these grand sweeping gestures.
Right.
It can be about those small everyday acts of courage. Like
Okay.
speaking up against a harmful joke.
Right.
Or standing up for someone being bullied.
Yeah.
Or even just refusing to be complicit
Right.
in behaviors that go against our values.
It's about recognizing that even those seemingly small actions
Yeah.
can really contribute to a larger shift
Right.
in attitudes and behaviors.
Exactly.
And for our listeners out there,
Yeah.
if Franca's story has piqued your interest,
Hmm.
I encourage you to really delve deeper.
Yeah, the case file episode we used is a great starting point.
Yeah.
There's also that fascinating article by Neve Cullen. It's titled, Franca Viola Says No, Gender Violence, Consent, and the Law in 1960s Italy.
Both sources provide a really, I think, much richer context
Absolutely.
and a deeper understanding
Yeah.
of the legal and social complexities
Yeah.
surrounding the case.
And as you learn more about Franca's story,
Right.
I really want you to consider,
Yeah.
like, the parallels with contemporary issues.
Yeah.
The fight for equality and justice.
Well,
It's
sure.
ongoing.
It is.
It requires, constant vigilance,
Oh,
courage,
yeah.
and a willingness to challenge the status quo,
Right.
even when it feels uncomfortable.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
we'll leave you with this final thought.
Okay.
What seemingly unchangeable norms in your own world
Hmm.
might you have the courage to challenge?
It's a good question.
Just as Franca Viola did all those decades ago.
Yeah.
Let's find our voices,
Yes.
stand up for what's right,
Right.
and work together
Yeah.
to create a world
Right.
where everyone can live with dignity,
Absolutely.
respect, and freedom.
Thank you for joining us.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.